So it's Tuesday, October 11th, and I think the Russians are making a huge mistake. And it's not just, I don't want them to rain missiles down on Ukrainian cities, but I think what they're doing right now is going to backfire. They're using missiles to target civilians. They say it's military and infrastructure, but it's really not. And they're using that when they should be using those to fight the people that are fighting them back. And I think it's motivated like this. So I read years ago, The March of Folly by Barbara Tuchman. I'm not recommending that you read the book, it's like that thick. And in one of the first chapters, they talked about Pearl Harbor. And the Japanese commander's idea was that if they just had this knockout blow in Pearl Harbor, well, we'd crush the American Navy, they'd be demoralized, and they would sit out the war. And that's not what happened. They did have a knockout blow. They did destroy a lot of the infrastructure. Now, mercifully, there was part of the fleet that was out to sea as well. But what it did was it galvanized Americans to fight. And I think that's what's going on in Ukraine. So here's the news. Here's the headlines. ABC News. What was going on? Well, as they were meeting at the UN on Monday's barrage. Now, this is going back a day. And the barrage that happened on Monday was while they were meeting at the UN talking about annexation by launching missile attacks on civilians sleeping in their homes or rushing their children towards schools. Because that's really what was happening. People are getting killed in the street as they're going to school. And that's just Russia's proven once again that it's a terrorist state and it must be deterred in the strongest possible ways. Russia has said that it was retaliating for a Ukrainian terrorist attack by being even more of a terrorist. So they destroyed much of Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. So if that was a terrorist incident, you are saying that you're a bigger terrorists. That's what that's amount to. A proposed assembly resolution would demand that Moscow, quote, immediately and unconditionally, unquote, scrap its proposed annexations, call on all countries not to recognize them. The measure, spearheaded by the European Union, would insist upon the immediate, complete, unconditional withdrawal of... So this is what Russia did not want to be the big story. And so, again, I think this was partly because of the Kerch and partly because Russia didn't want this to be the big story in the news. That's how the Russians operate. When there's a big G7 meeting or a UN meeting or EU meeting or NATO meeting, they tend to act up like that. But it was particularly motivated by the Kerch. Now, there's also speculation that it's because of the new boss, the new general that was put in charge. Army General Sergei Surkovin's previous experience as a commander of Russia's armed forces in Syria likely does not explain the massive wave of missile strikes. Okay, I think that's really important because I think what they're doing is trying to give him this credibility, but I don't think that that's going to actually work, and that doesn't explain it. Now, it goes that a little bit further. Belarus was saber-rattling. The Russian Federation is likely extracting ammunition and other material from Belarusian storage bases, activity that's incompatible with setting conditions for a large-scale Russian or Belarusian ground attack. So I think they're safely off on the side. I could be wrong, but that's what it appears to be. Okay, back to the missile attack story. Russia launches a new wave of airstrikes in Ukraine, a fresh wave of missiles. Now, yesterday there was 84 missiles, 13 aerial vehicles, drones that were launched against Ukraine. About half of that was shot down, but half of it got through, and that's bad. The Russian military continued to deliver massive strikes with high-precision, long-range weapons against military command facilities and energy system of Ukraine, said the Russian Defense Ministry said that. It was not, okay, so it was not against military command, and it was against some infrastructure, and if it was high precision, they have terrible precision because they were hitting city streets and parks, and it hit the office building where professors' office was. It was just, and so these are some of the cities, but there were many, many more. Okay, I don't usually use DW. This is a German paper, but here, Germany quickly to send air defense systems to Ukraine, and that's because they were asked. German Defense Minister Christine Lambrecht on Monday said Russian missile attacks on Ukraine's population center highlighted the urgency of delivering air defense systems to Kyiv. Now, they had promised to do this earlier, but it never actually got here. They have now sped up delivery time. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz had promised to provide the air defense systems in June. So again, it's been a while. During the Monday morning missile strikes, the German Foreign Ministry said a large building housing a German consulate was damaged. Now, they haven't been there for some time, but still, I mean, that's sovereign German territory, the way that consulates work. Okay, so there's no signs that Russia's planning to use nuclear weapons, says the GCHQ. That's the intelligence and cyber agency within the British intelligence network. The UK spy chief says the Kremlin does not appear to be engaged in preliminary steps for nuclear weapons. There's certain things that you would go through a process of, and they just don't see them, and that's good news. Sofia is the capital of Bulgaria. It's beautiful. I've been there, and they're saying nope, wasn't us. We weren't involved in this at all. That truck didn't come from here. If that is the truck that has actually done the damage, they put out a statement saying we're not involved. It wasn't us. Zelensky tells the G7 that Russia must be fully isolated as he seeks more anti-aircraft weapons. Remember, early on, he wanted a no-fly zone, and he didn't get that, but he keeps trying to get more and more weapons, and getting pummeled was actually a good thing in the sense, it's terrible, right? But it's a good thing in the sense that it loosens the grip of people who were otherwise going to provide it. So the US and Germany are now actively trying to get that out there as quickly as possible. So Zelensky addresses the G7. He says that Russia must be completely isolated and punished both politically and in terms of sanctions. Such steps can bring peace closer. They encourage the terrorist state to think about peace, about the unprofitability of war. Okay, again, I would just say, let's say that Crimea was terrorism. Now it's war. They're in the middle of a war, but let's say it's terrorism. If it is, then what Russia's doing is many times the size of terrorism. So he's right in calling it a terrorist state. If this isn't terrorism, I don't know what is. Okay, CNN, Biden says Putin totally miscalculated by invading Ukraine, but is a rational actor. Now, he's called him a thug and all kinds of names before. So calling him a rational actor just means that he's saying he's not crazy. He's not like psychotic. He's thinking through trying to grab this land, but he's not just like unbalanced. Evil, but not unbalanced. And so I think he's a rational actor, he says, who has miscalculated significantly. I think that's pretty fair. He has miscalculated significantly. I think he thought that he was going to be welcomed with open arms, and that this was the home of Mother Russia in Kyiv, and that where he was going to be welcomed. And I think he just totally miscalculated, Biden said. Okay, so that was the interview with Biden. Now let's have some fun with Russian state media. And here is Biden calls Putin a rational actor. Now, look how they twist this a little bit. He did say that, but just watch. Russia's President Vladimir Putin is a rational actor who has miscalculated significantly, says RT. I think he thought he was going to be welcomed with open arms. He says the same thing. And then it says, Biden choosing the comparatively benign rational actor to describe his Russian counterpart is a significant change in rhetoric, as he previously preferred to use words like killer, pure thug, murderous dictator, and war criminal. Lavrov told Russian media on Tuesday that the U.S. was already beginning to understand that they are going further than they intended regarding its involvement in the Ukrainian conflict. No, that's not what happened. He used the term rational actor to differentiate between, is he actually certifiably nuts or is he just evil and calculating? And he's saying he's evil and calculating. He's rational. Now, they take that and twist that to say, see how he scaled down the rhetoric? They're recognizing that they've already gone too far. And so this is what's being generated for both Russian press, Russian media, this is RT, and it'll be carried throughout the world. And I've shown you that before, how that works. Okay, Russia continues striking at critical infrastructure in Ukraine. So again, this is carried for the consumption of Russians and Russian-friendly audiences. The authorities in Ukraine regions report explosions and incidents, and they list all the cities. So they're showing the massive, mighty Russia, how they're pummeling them. They're pummeling them in Vinnytsia and Lviv, and critical infrastructure damage to Khmelnytskyi and Odessa and Zaporizhia. Wait, Zaporizhia? Isn't Zaporizhia supposed to be part of that annexed land, and they're going to fight for every Russian within in that territory, no, they're going to bomb them. And then they conclude down here, the Russian armed forces continue the massive strike with the spell people, come on, with the use of long-range, high-precision air and sea-based weapons targeting military command and energy facilities in Ukraine. The purpose of the strike was to achieve all designated targets were destroyed. So now either you're not high precision or you had the wrong targets, because you're hitting like the middle of a city street during rush hour. That's not hitting military infrastructure. It's not hitting energy. This is all bad. This is terrorism. Okay, next. Meta added to Russia's list of extremist and terrorist organizations. That's Facebook, Facebook's parent company. Mark Zuckerberg's Meta, formerly known as Facebook, is a terrorist and extreme organization. Why? Well, the US-based tech giant was accused of extremist activity for allowing hate speech directed toward Russian nationals. Well, stop doing stuff worthy of hate speech and you won't get it. Meta has denied allegations of allowing Russophobia on its platforms. That would be people like me saying anything bad about Russia. Russia is a terrorist state. That would be hate speech. So Facebook insisted that the decision to ease hate speech restrictions against Russian nationals was temporary and implemented only in certain regions such as Ukraine and Poland so people could vent their anger. Okay, so Facebook they're in an untenable position between what governments want and what they want to allow on their platform. But, if you're Russia, just stop bombing innocent civilians. And people won't say they're bombing innocent civilians. That's a terrorist act. That's a war crime. It actually is a war crime. I'll talk about that in another video about what war crimes are and how Russia's meeting those objectives. It's like they're checking it off a list. Russian strikes indicate that Moscow aims to change Zelensky's regime. And look how they're framing this. Again, this is in Pravda, RU. One does not negotiate with terrorists. So again, they're terrorists. We can't negotiate with them, so we have to change the regime in order to get anywhere. One does not negotiate with terrorists. State Duma speaker wrote on October 11th on his Telegram channel, the Kyiv regime has become a terrorist one. Peace negotiations with Zelensky are impossible, he believes, and so again, you have to change that. And they had a link here to Medyev's Telegram channel yesterday where he just said the same thing. In addition to the need to protect our people and borders, it is the complete dismantling of the political regime of Ukraine that should be the goal of our future actions. It's not about now we have this ground, now let's have peace. They do want to call for peace because it puts pressure on Kyiv, but they actually want to come back, regroup, and then come take the rest of it and take out the Kyiv regime. Even if Russia doesn't seek peace, I seek peace, and I call on Russia to end the war by returning illegally annexed Ukrainian land.